video, I am going to talk about Cori cycle. What is Cori cycle and why it is important in our body? That is what I am going to explain in this video. As we all know that the process of cellular respiration which takes place in the presence or in the absence of oxygen, that is known as aerobic and anaerobic respiration. There is plenty of oxygen in our body, so our body will undergo aerobic respiration. Now look at the figure. In this figure, the glucose is converted to pyruvate by the glycolysis processes. Then this pyruvate then converted to acetyl-CoA. Then this acetyl-CoA then enter into the TCA cycle and ultimately produces FADH and NADH. These FADH and NADH then enter into the electron transport chain and producing ATP. I will explain once more. In the aerobic respiration, the glucose is converted to pyruvate. The glucose is converted to pyruvate by the process of glycolysis. And this pyruvate then converted to acetyl-CoA. This acetyl-CoA then enter into the TCA cycle, and from the TCA cycle, the FADH and NADH are released. These FADH and NADH then enter into the electron transport chain to produce ATP. Now consider the anaerobic respiration. In the case of anaerobic respiration, the glucose is converted to pyruvate as in the case of aerobic respiration. But the conversion of pyruvate to acetyl-CoA is not takes place in this cycle because there is no oxygen. The oxygen is absent. So the pyruvate is converted to lactate in the presence of the enzyme lactate dehydrogenase. This is anaerobic respiration. So, in the anaerobic respiration, the glucose is converted to pyruvate by the glycolytic process. Then, the pyruvate is then converted to lactate by the enzyme lactate dehydrogenase. This is the reaction in which the pyruvate is converted to lactate by using NADH and in the presence of the enzyme lactate dehydrogenase. Here, lactate is the end product in the anaerobic respiration. The main purpose of the lactate production is to regenerate NADH, so that the glycolysis proceed uninterrupted in the skeletal muscle. The enzymes of gluconeogenesis. The enzymes of gluconeogenesis are absent in the muscles, so the conversion of lactate or pyruvate in the muscles cannot be takes place for the synthesis of the glucose. That is, the enzymes of the gluconeogenesis are absent in the muscles. So, the lactate or pyruvate produced in the muscles cannot be utilized for the synthesis of the glucose. But the plasma membrane is freely permeable to the lactate. So, the lactate is carried out from the skeletal muscle through the blood and handed over to the liver. So, the lactate is carried out from the skeletal muscle through the blood and handed over to the liver. So, the synthesis of glucose in liver from the skeletal muscle lactate and the reuse of this glucose by the muscle cells are known as Cori cycle. So, the synthesis of glucose in the liver from the skeletal muscle lactate and the reuse of this glucose by the muscle cells are known as Cori cycle. Now look at this figure. Here you can see that this is the muscle cell and this is the liver cell and this is bloodstream. These two are separated by the bloodstream. Then in muscle cells, the glucose is converted to pyruvate and then to lactate. This lactate then transported to the blood, and from the blood this is enter into the liver. In the liver, this lactate is converted to pyruvate and then this pyruvate is then converted to glucose through the process of gluconeogenesis. And from the liver, the glucose formed is again transported to the blood. From the blood, this then enter into the muscle cells. And this glucose is reutilized for the synthesis of energy in the muscles. These are the steps of Cori cycle. Once more, in muscles, the glucose is converted to pyruvate, and this pyruvate then converted to lactate in the anaerobic condition, and this lactate then enter into the bloodstream. From the blood it enter into the liver cells, and in the liver cells the lactate is converted to pyruvate, and then this pyruvate is again converted to glucose. This glucose then enter into the blood, and from the blood this again enter into the muscles, and it is this glucose is utilized for the synthesis of the energy. This is Cori cycle. This cycle mainly carried out during the intense exercise. For example, when we are running for a long distance, what happens is that normally there are two locations in our body where the energy is synthesized. They are liver and muscles. So, when we are doing intense exercise, our muscle cells try to produce energy by utilizing glucose. But in this situation, the muscle cells did not get enough oxygen to convert the glucose to acetyl-CoA. But the conversion of glucose to pyruvate is carried out because there is no need of oxygen. But the pyruvate is not converted to acetyl-CoA in the absence of oxygen. So this pyruvate is then converted to lactic acid by the enzyme lactate dehydrogenase, and that lactate is utilized for the synthesis of the glucose through this Cori cycle. This is about the Cori cycle. Thank you.